Hey guys, welcome to another episode of RevOps and ABM Alignment. Today we have Sam Sutton from London. Hey
Hello.
Sam, welcome to the show.
Hey Romeo, how you doing? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you also. We were talking before about Newcastle and Alan Shearer and all these football topics because, yeah, that's the first thing you do with the British person. That's the easiest way to start a conversation. And very fast we went into, these talented young players. So before we hit record, we were actually talking what is top of mind today in RevOps for Sam, and what came up is talent. So in today's episode, we will talk about RevOps talent. But before we dive into that topic and how we build, RevOps, let's say, gurus and experts that can lead our companies with AI in the future. Let's talk first about Sam. And Sam, the company that you come from, just give us a quick intro and how did you end up in RevOps?
Yeah, no, thanks Romeo. So it's a really good time to be talking about football with a Brit or with an Englishman, I guess.
Exactly.
So to just sort of like, because I appreciate when these things go out, like things have changed. So I'm hoping when this goes out, England won the Euros and we're all very happy. At the moment, we're just on the precipice of the semi-final of the Euros. And it's funny you mentioned Alan Shearer actually. So I had the pleasure of watching the England game with my children on last weekend on Saturday. It was a lot of fun. It's the first time all of my
Oh,
kids
nice.
have been really into it. And I was chatting to them and I said, who are those people that are on the TV before the game? You know, the people that sit around the sofas and the people that, and they were like, they had no idea who they were. Like, didn't know who Gary Lineker was, didn't know who Mika Richards was, didn't know, yeah, they have got no idea who these people are. And it made me realize that I'm old, was the first thing I
Thierry
realized.
Henry.
Yeah, exactly. They got no idea these legends of the game, but they've got their own legends, right? So you know their heroes are my youngest son is absolutely obsessed with Saka, and also he's a big fan.
Mm.
Randomly, he's a big fan of Luke Shaw, but he also thinks Luke Shaw's really old. Like which, and I remember Luke Shaw being signed to Man United years and years ago, and it was like he was really young. So it's sort of these things go around, and it's a good, nice segue into talent. So hopefully England win, and we're all good. But yeah, in terms of me, so I'm director of revenue operations at Pearson. Pearson, a lot of people know of Pearson in some way in their lives because of education. So you might have done exams or had books at school, or your kids
Yeah.
might have had books. But we're quite a broad company, or broader than people realise. And specifically, I work in a part of Pearson that is all about providing that learning and that education into the workplace, which I think is really exciting because the development of skills and the sort of credentialing of skills and assessments, etc., the stuff that schools do really well and universities do really well, it has a real value in the workplace as well, especially given we're on the precipice of this sort of like massive, arguably, boom in terms of AI. That's like we're right in the middle of that, and it's like to me, and internally to answer, sorry, one of your questions, how I got here, which is probably leads us on nicely to talent discussion in a way. So I started off as a salesperson, did that for many, many years, became a sales manager, was on a very linear trajectory, if you see what I mean, in my career. And then I took a bit of a gamble and went into product management on a secondment and spent a year in product, which was loads of fun. I learned a lot and it was completely different. After that, it was very obvious to me when I was in product that people in products were very passionate about their products and had a really, really good understanding of customers, but didn't really have a good understanding of salespeople and marketing people, if you like, and what really worked. So I sort of tried to form a bit of a bridge between those things and ended up in, I guess, a sales enablement role, which I loved. Set up a sales enablement team,
Mm-hmm.
did that for a few years. And then because I quite like technology, because I'm a bit of a geek, I suppose, if you see what I mean, you might call it. I just got more and more into the sort of sales tech and the CRM and all the things we could do. And that sort of led very naturally to applying for a RevOps role 2 years ago. And I've been RevOps now for that,
Mm-hmm.
that amount of time, going from just me to setting up a really small team. And so I've been through it once of like recruiting talent into RevOps. And to me, it's quite exciting, but quite challenging at the same time in terms of finding that talent. And I don't know if your other guests have been reflecting on this, but where do you find, the Sackers, the future Alan Shearers, if you like, where do, and if you continue the football
Yeah.
analogy, and I'd never really thought of it like this, but football clubs do invest quite young. I'm not suggesting we're going to find, RevOps people at primary school like football clubs do, but I do think we can find them at business schools. I think we can find them in apprenticeships. I think it doesn't have to be university either. I think you can find it in interns. I think it's quite challenging though. What skills do you look for is what goes through my head, and I'm really starting to reflect on that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of RevOps is not really sexy, let's be honest. I mean, it's not like if you're in a. I mean, I love it. I geek out about it,
No,
but
you're right.
I think I love it because I understand. You need to understand the full business model and the whole business as a whole to be really successful in RevOps and ABM also. Like you need to understand really well the top of the funnel, middle of the whole, how leads come in, all the ads, all the tracking, the measurement, all the lead magnets, all the lead nurturing. So you really need to understand how you bring leads in, and then what you do with those leads, and later on how you build them up, right?
Yeah.
So if you think of someone who wants to get into, let's say, B2B SaaS marketing, um, it's much sexier to do ads, right? It's more
Yeah.
creative. You have copy, you have, the artsy part of it, or the graphics and so on. While RevOps, it's very, numbers based and processes and so on. So the question that I have for you is how we attract a less sexy department, right?
Yeah.
But a department that looks over the whole company at the end of the day, right?
I think you really hit the nail on the head of something that I hadn't really thought of, but I knew to be true. So on a couple of occasions, I've been fortunate enough to go and speak to sort of students at high schools or even at universities and colleges, and you ask them what they want to do, and inevitably, aside from saying they want to, have their own YouTube channel and make a fortune and be like Jake Paul or something like that, but if they like come away from that fantasy for a bit, it is things like marketing, or they want to create products, they want to be innovative, and I think they would not look at a job in RevOps. I can't imagine a job as RevOps pops off the page to those people. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because you could probably say the same about maybe, I don't know, a computer engineer or something like that. Like, that's quite a specific specialist skill. But the reality is we haven't got university courses churning out RevOps people. I don't even know if we want them. I'm a big believer in we find our people in all sorts of different walks of life. So I think that whole RevOps not being particularly sexy, we both love it, but I think that is very true. And I think what we need to do is promote the creative side of RevOps, because it's hugely creative. I think we do it a disservice to say it's all about the numbers. Like, it is, obviously, but to me, creative, like, if you put it into 4 pillars, I think RevOps is analytics first and foremost. It's also process, which again doesn't sound very sexy, but you can be very creative with process, like sort of problem solving. I probably wouldn't call it process, I'd probably call it problem solving. So you've got kind of the analytics and insight problem solving. You've then got technology, and I think people don't really realize what technology can do. They're experiencing it every day, right? So I was looking for products for my dad's birthday. It was a while ago, a couple of months ago, and you start looking, right, and then all of a sudden you're just getting bombarded with ads. And we've had this all our lives, right? This sort of, like, well, not all our lives, but for quite a long time, it feels like we've had this, right? Until I got into RevOps, I didn't really realize how all this stuff worked. like all the stuff in the background around, intent, around signals. And I find it really fascinating. So I think you could attract people with an interest in numbers, or people with an interest in problem solving, or people with an interest in kind of the human mind, if you like. I think there's that part of RevOps as well, if you see what I mean, of how people think, what behaviors people are going to do. And then I think the bit that I'm very passionate about that has to be part of RevOps, but people sometimes argue with me on this, is enablement. So like that, but I mean like cross
Mm-hmm.
business, like you summed it up, right? It's end to end. It's like end to end enablement of like, you can't just come up with like, you can't just dump a new piece of technology or come up with a new dashboard or report or, solve a problem if you can't get people to follow you. I think that's one of the biggest challenges I see in the talent pool. That sort of not only having the kind of unicorns, I wonder, of having all those skills together, in terms of people who can do all those four things.
But let's break it down, like, because I have some ideas on, or some, let's say, doubts even. Maybe
Yeah.
we can discuss about it when it comes to RevOps talent. But before we do that, maybe we can break down what you guys do in terms of RevOps
Yep.
at Pearson, so we
Yeah.
understand what kind of skills we need for
Yeah.
this.
And almost every RevOps leader I've ever spoken to is different, right? They have like a different view on this because it's
Yeah.
like not, but like, so my team is, so I have a part of the team that runs the tech stack. So we've got like Salesforce admins and, integration specialists that pull all the technology together. I've then got part of the team that
Mm.
do analytics and the sort of insight analytics like Tableau, looking at the data, etc., keeping the data structure sound and developing it for the future. I've got an enablement person, so the person who takes the things that those people do, so new processes, new flows in Salesforce, and they make it happen with the teams. But in addition to that, they actually do sales enablement in the more traditional sense of like sales skills training, product training. We try and embed those things very tightly.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, there's like the strategy piece, I call it, which actually sits with me. Like I don't have a person doing that, which is like the territories, the quotas, the direction of travel, the sort of bringing those things together and seeing, operationally where there are opportunities to improve and how that links to our OKRs and our strategy. So we are separated into those four
Mm.
pillars, if you like. So enablement, analytics, tools, and strategy, if you like. Okay, so that's sort of where we sit. And there's a really
And
small
how
team.
much
Go on, sorry.
how much of this is fire extinguishing?
Ha! Too much. Yeah, that's a very, very astute. Yeah. That's it's constant. Like I feel like it's constantly sort of
Okay.
reactionary rather than being strategic and proactive. And the context behind that is we're still a very new business. So people might laugh at that when they think about Pearson,
Mm.
because Pearson is a very old business. I should know
It's
this.
quite old. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's about 180 years old or something like that. But the piece of Pearson I'm in is very,
yeah.
very new. It was only set up 2 years ago. So we are
Okay.
still learning. And as a result, there's too many fire drills, I would say, definitely.
Mm. Okay. So if we take someone new that we want to recruit, let's say, let's talk about building talent, right? Like we are Ajax Amsterdam, we are building up um uh, players like from ground zero, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, do we? The question would be: are we throwing this person more into a role where it supports fire extinguishing, or we keep it away from fire extinguishing?
Yeah. And we've naturally done that in my team, funnily enough, but it has been
Mm-hmm.
intentional in a way. But yes, I think you do need. I'm a big fan. I don't know if you've heard of this concept called build and run. I like this as a concept, or another way
Mm.
it's been put to me is like a relay race. So when you're working as a team really well,
Mm-hmm.
it's a relay race, and if you To give you another sporting example, and the Olympics is around the corner. The Olympic team that did very, very well in, I want to say it was the last Olympics. It might have actually been the Olympics before that, in the 4x100 meters, was the British team. They did much better than they were meant to, and it wasn't because they were the best sprinters.
Mm-hmm.
They just categorically weren't. It's demonstrable that they are not the best sprinters. But what they were very, very good at is the handover. So like they really focused on the handover. And I like that analogy largely because I like sporting analogies, so they always speak to me. But that I think there is a natural tension between having people that are reactive, let's say, rather than firemen or firewomen. They're reactive, and then there's people that are proactive. But I think there's a handover between those two motions, if you like, that we often get wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I mean, we've had an issue last week where we had a sort of Office 365 issue. I didn't really fully understand exactly what happened, initially at least, and we had to work it out and fix it. We had a few, connection issues, if you see what I mean. Just like a bit of a pain of a day, to be honest with you. Right, the day before, first day of the quarter, basically, or first couple of days of the quarter. Not good, right? Do you know what I mean? Not where we want to be. So obviously a bit of stress getting that sorted, working with the technical teams. We all piled on that to sort that out. And we didn't, I don't think, necessarily think about the downstream effects of the changes we were making, if you see what I mean, as well as we should. So I really like the idea of like, if we're bringing it back to, we're Ajax, which they're a great team. I'd love to be Ajax. You are, if you think about, and actually, I have to be honest with you, Romeo. I do like football, but I much prefer rugby. Rugby is my sport. So in rugby, you tend to have a captain, but you also have a defensive captain, and they probably aren't the same people because it takes a different mentality. And some teams they can be, because some teams you just have really exceptional captains that can do both, if you see what I mean. But the defensive captain is like, they're the firefighter, right? Do you know what I mean? They're the person who, what they do is really simple. Like, it's get up as a line, get up as a team, and meet that line, with a bit of brutality, bit of intensity, bit of aggression. But they're not making clever decisions necessarily. Let's be honest, if you see what I mean, it's quite simple. I can see a RevOps structure where you almost have a very purposeful sort of reactive team, if you like, with a sort of team captain, so to speak, if you see what I mean, and a sort of more longer term focused team. Like that's your leadership team, almost, if you like. Because I've seen so many different structures. I've seen people pair up, RevOps executives or RevOps, whatever you want to call them, analysts with specific regions. So you just get like, this person is like the EMEA person, this person's the, APAC person, whatever. That's great until one of those people is off, or one of them is perceived to be better than the other ones. Do you know what I mean? All of a sudden you've got a very flat structure there where it's not really a team then. It's almost like a group of consultants who work for you, but you don't really, they don't talk to each other that much. They think they're in their own world. So I'm not a big fan of that structure particularly. Sometimes you have to go down that route. I've then done the structure that I've done, which is more like, I guess, outcome based, if that makes sense. Like, you're responsible for these things, you do this thing, you're responsible for these things. The problem with that structure is it gets quite siloed as well. And you get the problem with talent. If we bring it back to the talent conversation, I'm recruiting generally from maybe quite early in the talent pool, like quite, sort of fairly junior members of staff. Generally, I've got a few more experienced members of the team. And if one of those was to leave, I would obviously want to replace. But when you're recruiting quite early on in someone's career, you don't want to silo them too much, I don't think. You want to broaden their experience, right? And I definitely, so yeah, I'm sort of, sorry, I'm waffling here a little bit, Romeo, but I like your idea of like kind of acknowledging the push and pull between the long-term requirements and the strategy and the short-term firefighting.
Yeah, and so we established that, okay, we can have talent that can go into, fire extinguishing, and the talent that is more on the prepared for that planning and enablement and long-term type of team. The question is, do we create, or do we want them to experience, you know, all kind of ops, like marketing ops, sales ops, customer
Mm-hmm.
success ops, before going into one of the teams, or before being independent, right? Because I believe that uh, at the end of the day, RevOps come before RevOps, it was sales ops, right?
Yeah,
And before sales ops, there was like just marketing generalist, right? There was no ops. There was a person in marketing who was dealing with the
there was a
HubSpot
person
or
who
Marketo
had to use
or
spreadsheets
Salesforce.
and stuff like that. They were like,
Yeah, exactly.
a lot of us who came into RevOps, I think, were that person in some way or form. They were the salesperson that was best at Excel, or they were you find your way, right, because of your skills and your interests. But yeah, in terms to answer your
Yeah,
question,
exactly.
I love the idea. I'm a big fan of having a very clear um, journey that someone can go on with their skills, from when they're quite early in their career
Mm-hmm.
to, not all of their steps mapped out, because I'm also think that people can go weird and wonderful directions and do whatever they want, right? But if you can, like, say, take when I was in sales, when I first went in sales, I started off as an SDR. We didn't call them then at that point, but that's what I was. And there was a mapped out journey, right? From being an SDR to an AE to an enterprise AE to a sales manager.
BDR, or yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Those things were clear and they were good. I think the reality is, and you could imagine, right, in a RevOps team, you could have like some junior executives that maybe each specialize in, marketing ops, sales ops, customer success ops, and maybe I can imagine them being interns or graduates, and maybe there's a circulation. If he's like, there's a cycle they go through to get the experience, and then above them, you maybe have some more senior associates, if you see what I mean, who are, maybe more focused on the shorter term, the longer term, and then you maybe have someone like me. The reality is, I think we are we don't have the luxury of having enough people to do that often. So I think there's a resourcing challenge,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want your rev. It comes back to, where do you report into, and this is like a hot debate in RevOps at the moment. So if you report into the sales leader, there's huge advantages to that because you're close to the sales team, but you can sometimes end up looking like a cost center. Same with a marketing CMO, or same with, a VP of customer success or whatever. I know people in RevOps who report directly into the CEO, and that's not something that would happen at a company my size necessarily, and that's fine. But I think when you report into someone who's globally significant in terms of operations, or you get more. It seems to me, and I've not experienced it to be fair, but from people I know and I've talked to, that seems to be an easier way to grow a RevOps team to a suitable size without being seen as a bit of a cost center. And I think that's a real danger that all RevOps people have to be mindful of, in terms of where you see, how you're
Mm-hmm.
perceived, and also how you prove your value. You have to absolutely prove that value as well. You can't just go off and spend money. How do you get that return on investment? So I think the push and pull there is like the size of the teams versus the structure that you would like.
Mm-hmm. So if we think about competencies and skills,
Yeah,
what are some of those that you really need as a RevOps talent, just to start off, right? Like, you never worked in RevOps. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what
Yeah,
what should I have as a
yeah, yeah. So
potential
let's say
RevOps
Romeo, I'll
specialist?
you're fresh out of school or university, or start your career, or maybe you've had a completely different career doing something else and you just want to change. You think this RevOps thing is the thing for you.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I think we sometimes prioritize the skills and competencies that are not as important as we think. So, like an example, and people are going to think I'm wild and crazy for this, but if you having loads of Salesforce skill, for example, like, but if you don't have, the ability to I think communicate at a high level. I think you need to be able to communicate and influence at sort of like a VP level, really. And if you don't have the ability to sort of problem solve and I guess project manage as well, and I mean project manage with a small p and a small m, do you know what I mean? Like planning and organizing essentially. Like your Salesforce skills are great, but I could probably teach someone who is probably cheaper, to be honest with you, those skills. And if they've got these other skills, they're sometimes harder to teach, right? Like that sort of, I hate calling them soft skills because I don't agree with that term because that somehow infers that they're less important. And I really don't believe that's true. So for me, I try and find the people that have both. I always say I want the people that can do the communication and the planning and the organizing and the influencing as well as they can do the technical stuff. And for the people that I've recruited that are quite early in their careers, and I've got one example in my head, someone specifically who I'm a big supporter of. I think he's amazing. He's right at the start of his career. He had no technical skills whatsoever when he came into me, really. But what I could see from what he had was he was a problem solver. Like I could prove that early on in his interview. You know, I could, and there are question frameworks you can do this. There are even, I hate to do a plug for Pearson on this, but we do have a product that actually does this, which assesses someone's ability to problem solve. It's a known thing. You know, you can categorically assess that, and we do. And I want people that are very good at that because I can send them on a Salesforce course. Do you know what I mean? I can introduce them to
I
Salesforce,
get
or
your point.
Gong, it could be anything, or Gong or HubSpot or any of these tools. And also, like, I do really believe as well that these tools have got so good in the last couple of years that you can be quite old school about them in your thinking sometimes and think you need to be really
Yeah, for
skilled with
sure.
them.
Like
But actually, they're quite guided now. Do you know what I mean? Like the how you do it. There's a lot of resources out there.
it's amazing. Like I'm not developer, but lately I made some scraping Python scripts with ChatGPT, right? Like
Exactly.
I just need to know what to ask and how to do. So there is so much resource. And when it comes to Salesforce and HubSpot, like come on, you can do screenshots of the portal and just put it in and ask questions, right? I mean, of course, be aware of sensitive data, but the point is, as you said, that it can be guided. And
Sorry, you just made me
I
think.
have a small story.
Sorry, I think it made me think of something else though. So I'll let you. I'd love to hear your story. I actually think that in RevOps, it's as important to know how to say no to things and why you should say no as to say yes to things. Okay, because sometimes people come along with like, you know, we should do this, and you have to be the person that is protective of the status quo at the same time as being innovative, if you see what I mean. And that's a bit of a tension. And it makes me realize that my time working in the exam industry actually really prepared me for this role. And I hadn't realized it until this moment, which is why I interrupted you. So apologies, Romeo. But like in the exam, so I'm talking about GCSEs and A levels, which are like the summative exams that you do at 16 or 18 in the UK. It's a very tightly regulated industry. And so people have a bit more of a mentality at times of not saying no as such, but really being sure something is going to be the right thing to do for learners before you don't do something. It's quite risk averse, if you like. And I think sometimes if I think about the people that have come into my team that have been really good, they are absolutely capable of being innovative and they're really positive as well, but they're also pragmatic. I think pragmatism is a really important skill, and that comes with that sort of communication skills thing. Like it's hard to say no to. Like if you're a junior member of staff and you've got a VP of sales who's quite experienced and quite direct, saying do this, it can be quite difficult to say no. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted your story. It just like struck me as a really key competency, that sort of pragmatism.
Yeah, I have a friend who is a friend from Belgium who owns a recruitment agency, and he told me that he hired a waiter. He was at the as a recruiter, and I was
Yeah,
like, okay. I said the guy really knew how to sell his product, let's say. And recruitment, at the end of the day, in a recruitment agency, you need to sell the job. Like, to be honest, it sounds like rocket science. Of course, it's IT recruitment or more technical. But he said, you know what? Like, all the competition was so into, oh, we need a recruiter who really know what is Python and Java and knows all the small details. I mean, fuck it, I can teach this guy what is Python and Java and
absolutely.
all these stuff. But I cannot. It's really hard to teach someone, communication skills or how to simple thing, how you connect with people, like fast, like
Yeah,
super fast. In
absolutely.
a And as a recruiter, you need that, right?
100%.
So can do you think, like, in RevOps, can we have such examples? If yes, what are those skills that are, and I'm coming back, I understand that you talked about the VP and so on, but what are those, like, specific, um I don't know how to call them, skills or competencies
Well,
that
I guess,
you need?
yeah, play back your question in a slightly different way. I think it's an interesting thought experiment to think about what different professions there might be RevOps people hiding in, if you
Yeah.
see what I mean. Like, sort of like they don't even know it yet themselves. And I've had personal experience of this, not directly in RevOps, I will acknowledge, but in my sales enablement role, I took people from a variety of different backgrounds and saw them really excel in sales enablement. So
Mm.
marketing was like, it's not a revolutionary one, marketing, but actually that was quite a big deal. Not many people had made that move from marketing to that, that sales enablement type role. And they were fantastic and they really brought a different perspective. But then the other one that really strikes me, and it's an obvious one in some respects, enablement, but it's teachers, right? So I had teachers come in.
Yeah.
And now I think that what's really interesting about RevOps is, and I haven't personally experienced this, but I know colleagues in the network I'm in, if you like, who will talk about all sorts of weird and wonderful job functions. And the one that really kept in my mind was travel agents, which might seem like a bit of a bizarre,
Mm.
right? But travel agency, if you're working in a quite high demand travel agents, like that's quite an intense job. Do you know what I mean? You're dealing with people. You think about it, when you book a
Mm.
holiday, right? You want the best that you can possibly afford, and you want a brilliant experience, right? You also probably want far too much choice than you really should have, if you see what I mean. And you need, it's kind of like a series. If you think about it from a RevOps play, being a travel agent, I think, is kind of like having little sort of intent signals from the person that you're dealing with, right? Like, do you want to go on?
Mm.
Do you want to go somewhere sunny, or do you want to be really busy, or do you want to be really relaxed? There's all these things, right? And you have to. So that's the communication piece, right? And it's also quite a technical role because things high paced and like you're having to book things, and there's lots of interdependencies of one another. And I know these travel agents don't really exist that much anymore, right? We don't think of travel agents like that anymore because most of us just go onto a website, right, book our holidays. But they do. Like, there are quite big companies who still have people like this. Okay, and I do think
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not saying exclusively the travel industry is one source, but I don't think that's a place that the average RevOps team would traditionally think to look. Um, and and you probably
Mm-hmm.
haven't got people in those roles that are traditional sales ops, traditional RevOps people, if you like, in terms of their background. But it's an example of where you have people with the problem solving and the communication skills, and also the work ethic as well, right? Like, it's intense. So yeah, I think there's lots of examples, I'm sure, and I think it's about just being really open minded about where you get this talent from, rather than it being self-serving because you always look in the same places.
So what's the pitch for these folks? Like, why would they join? Because that's the idea, right? Like, there is a lack of talent in RevOps, and we are trying to build that that pipeline,
Yeah.
the talent pool, let's say. Um,
I,
so, what's the pitch for someone to
to me,
join an
yeah,
agency or to join a company like yours?
well, to me, the pitch of getting into RevOps is quite simple, really, in that it is probably one of the only parts of the business where you can truly be end to end in terms of having an impact on the business, in terms of a commercial org, I suppose, to be fair. There isn't an exec or a C-suite role. You know, like it's sort of you can be relatively junior and have experience across the whole business. So that's one thing. I also think
Yeah.
that it is it's a growth industry, right? There are going to be more RevOps people in the future. It's one of the fastest growing disciplines in the commercial function. And I don't say that because people can read into that means that like you don't want to go into sales because there's going to be fewer salespeople because of AI, etc. I actually don't agree with that. I think that's not going to happen. But I think the need for good quality RevOps people is going to grow, and that's it's not just my opinion. That is quite well documented. So the sell is you're across the whole business. You are important and we're going to continue to be important. Like it's not something that we're not going to need in the future. And I think the last thing is probably the thing we have to do a better job in persuading people of. Because I think if you ask the average person who's not in RevOps, what do you think it's like being in a room full of RevOps people at a conference? And I can tell you what it's like because I've done it many times. But I reckon they would probably think it was quite boring. Do you know what I mean? Bit quiet, probably not that creative. It's
Yeah.
totally opposite. If I think of like, and I'm going to give a shout out to my fellow London RevOps people, who we like to refer to ourselves as the RevOps Fennel Club, which is for a whole nother story for maybe the end of the podcast as to why we're called the Fennel Club. But it's a hugely bright, vibrant group of people who are incredibly creative. So it's like there's a stereotype, I suppose, is what I'm saying, that isn't true. So like I would probably say to someone, you're wrong in the nicest possible way. Come and meet some people. Like let me prove to you that these people are really high end, but also super creative. Because actually you have to be creative to solve problems like this. Yeah, there has to be a creative streak.
Yeah. You're talking about RevOps Co?
No, I'm not, funnily
Like you are
enough,
in the
but I'm aware of
community,
them.
right?
We've got our own breakaway community. It's very small. There's only a few of us. Yeah. But the RevOps Co-op are great as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think as soon as you are in this community, you can see the difference. Okay, so we have that. Another question would be, how much time do we give to a RevOps employee to start ramping up? Because this is, I think, crucial to understand, right? Because if I hire someone in marketing, right, like I can in very short time, especially now with AI, start to say, okay, so make a social media plan. Let's
Yeah.
start to create some posts, and you can right away get into it because you have influencers, you're consuming social, right? So it's much easier. While you don't really consume RevOps, I mean, you don't really know where to start, right?
Yeah.
So how do you see like some kind of roadmap, or
So
when does this RevOps person starts to be
yeah. So
really
I
effective?
so I like the concept that is in the book, The First 90 Days, which is called getting to your break
Mm,
even point. So the idea of your break even point is where you're giving out as much value as you're consuming, if you see what I mean. And when we first start, like you imagine, like first day in a new job, all you're doing is consuming energy from the company, right? Because you're a sponge and you don't know anything. You've got to learn all the basics, right?
Yeah.
How do I log onto the system? Where do I go for this? Where do I go for that? Where is the canteen? Like in the old days when we'd be in like you're just consuming, right? And you're not giving anything back. And the book talks about that is a set period of time, which is typically about 90 days. It flexes massively, and it depends on you, your industry, the company. But the only thing you really can affect is accelerating it. You can't change the fact that that's going to happen. So I think the first thing to say is you have to accept people are going to, like, they are going to need a period of time to break even. And I actually think you have to be cognizant of if someone's never done this before, like if it's their first RevOps job, that is going to probably be longer. And I'm not a big fan of the sort of if you haven't got to this point, by this point, you're no good type thing, because you might be sacrificing these skills that presumably you've tested for during the interview in the first place. What I think you have to do, though, is give them opportunities very quickly to get wins under their belt. So quick wins. So, for example, like you bring someone new on, they haven't got a clue how to use Salesforce or anything. I'm picturing someone who's really properly like new to something. Do you know what I mean? And I can think of an example of a guy I took on. It was his like first couple of weeks, and I was like, look, it was like a horrible little job, right? That I didn't want to do, if I'm really honest. We got this data set, we got this data set, we need to match them. You know, it's an important piece of work because it's helping this VP over there, you know, go and do it. And he's like, I don't know how to do that. Then talk to me, go and learn. And in actual fact, it was quite an easy task in some respects, but it enabled that person to be able to say within their first week or so, I did this. Have they learned how to do RevOps at that point? No, they haven't. So I guess what I'm trying to say is how long is the ramp? I honestly don't know. I think it varies massively for the person and the role. You know, science, so to speak, pseudoscience tells us it's about 90 days for people on average. But I think you just get them, if the more quick wins you can get under their belt early, that are easy things, like quick wins, I mean kind of easy wins, I suppose, if you see what I mean, where they're actually adding value and they're demonstrating they're getting confidence, the quicker you'll make that break even point. So that's my mentality when it comes to it.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important to understand those activities or those tasks that this person can shine at in the first 90 days, because you want to make it as comfortable as possible and to make sure that this person has achievements and feels that it can contribute in the company.
Yeah.
Because if we don't do that, then they can get scared or it's also demotivating, right? So before doing RevOps and doing my agency for like 8 years now, I was incorporate in learning and development,
Right.
so-called enablement, right? And it was mainly learning and development and talent development. And one of the things that we were doing is performance appraisal. I know that is very corporate BS thing, but in corpo, you do this 360-degree feedback plus some teams do it, but the performance appraisal is always there, right? Like you have some company like direction of what are the competencies that you need to evaluate each position on, plus the values of the company, whatever. And we would always see in these numbers that anyone who was new, right? It has that enthusiasm, obviously, at the beginning, and they want to learn. So it was this honeymoon effect at the beginning, but after the honeymoon effect, you go down to wash that you need to wash dishes, a dirty job that you need to do in a marriage, not only in the honeymoon. So that demotivation was that I don't see that I contribute, or I don't see that I actually make an impact here, because all the seniors do all the jobs, and the old guys do the jobs, and I'm still learning. So obviously it's like with overwhelming with the information that you get, but I think one of the, and this is what we do also in the agency, like one of the first thing was okay, what you did really well in the previous company, or what you are really good at and you really want to do that, let's do it right away. Like,
Yeah,
let's, so that you can have that initial impact.
absolutely.
Um, when we talk about recruitment in that case, let's bringing the agency discussion also, and just to understand, and for everyone, when you actually need an agency and when you are actually, because I have a feeling that with agency we will never have the same uh, level of patience, right? Like, you want impact right away, even though they are maybe same as a new recruit, like just trying to figure out your company, right?
Yeah.
But you need ROI. It's obvious, right? You need ROI, and you need to ramp them up fast. But in what scenarios you would opt for talent coming from an agency?
I mean, so full disclosure, I've never been in the position to do that in this role. I would like to have been.
Mm.
Like, I have looked at it as options, and we've just not. I think that there's, like, I'm in a classic example at the moment where it would have been helpful. So we're rolling out a CPQ platform at the moment, and it's a big project that
Mm-hmm.
has added a. I'm not going to say it's temporary, because we're adding a CPQ product to our tech stack, so it's not like it's going to go away. But there's like a spike, right, in like the effort that is needed, and we've been very fortunate to have some excellent support for some people in Pearson who have been brought in temporarily, if you like. But I think we needed, this is me retrospectively thinking about it, needed a little bit more firepower in the RevOps team during this time, because the project has consumed like three of us, myself included, like maybe at times it feels like 100% of the time, but that's not, it's hyperbole, but it's consumed big parts of the day regularly, if you see what I mean. Like, and it's been ongoing for a couple of months. It would have been so much more powerful to let those other people, myself included, to keep on with their job, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, keep their day job going and have someone focused on this initial rollout. So I think that's a classic example of how you can deploy an agency sort of employee, if you like. And the other thing as well with agency employees, and I have used them in different roles, if you see what I mean. Like, in product, I use them quite a lot. They can sometimes turn into either regular employees, so to speak, if you see what I mean. Like, that journey goes, or they turn into a regular agency type person. Do you know what I mean? Where you're like, for this amount of time, I bring you in, I use
Mm-hmm.
you for this. And I actually think there's quite a benefit. Yes, I think you're right about, like, the need to see a return on investment, but you're also being very specific about what you want them to do. Typically, in my experience, so you are being brought in to do this thing, and they tend to be quite motivated to do that, because it's like they're not getting dragged into all the other stuff. Do you know what I mean? And they come with a fresh perspective as well, which is
Mm-hmm.
super useful. You think about diversity of thought in your team. Obviously, we can get that with diversity of people and backgrounds and experience, but sometimes you can't get away from the fact that there's groupthink in a group that works together. There just always is, no matter how diverse you are. So having someone who comes in and goes,
Mm.
"Why are you doing it that way?" temporarily is real positive. So I think it's, to me, the obvious use case is projects, like a projects-based approach to using agency, or I guess a moments-based approach. If you see what I mean, like, for example, if you had a very big change in your company, a big product launch coming out or something like that, like sort of a marquee moment, that might be a moment to sort of throw a little bit more firepower on the resource.
So, if you would start now RevOps role again, like really at the beginning, would you rather join an agency or a team with the product? Is the benefit of the agency, I believe, is the diversity of the industries, right?
Yeah.
And what you see from.
I think my gut feel, honestly, is join a team, but I think it's probably because of what I'm used to. Like, there's confirmational bias in my thoughts, if you know what I mean. I can really see the benefits of being. In fact, I'm going to walk back on what I said. I met a guy at a Salesforce conference. I just literally got chatting to him at lunch. I didn't know him, probably will never come across him again in my life, if you see what I mean. Like a random meeting. And he was essentially a consultant, basically, but I suppose it's kind of agency work, if you see what I mean, in terms of like he was going business to business doing his Salesforce thing, right? I got talking to him about Salesforce. It was very obvious. A couple of things were very obvious to me straight away. This guy knew his stuff, and he was super young. Do you know what I mean? Like, he made me feel really old. So knew his stuff from a Salesforce point of view, but had a really rich experience from different businesses because he'd seen these same scenarios like play out in lots of different, places. So actually, I think that it would be massively beneficial if you're starting your career to go down that route. It's a little bit like, I think, to bring it back to teachers, some people actually really like being a supply teacher, like a temporary teacher, because it gives them that flexibility, they can move around, and they get, a richer experience. But then some people like the idea of having a settled, like, I'm here sort of thing.
Yeah. So when I started my career, I started in learning and development, but not in the corporations. But first, I went to training and development company. I was one of the youngest, and all these guys were like senior trainers, consultants, but on things like organizational development, so-called back then. This was 2008. Soft skills, right? I know that you don't like that word, so that's why I was mentioning that those skills like the stress management, communication, teamwork, so on. And these guys were going into companies when these companies were acquired, or they had management change management, or they were doing this employee survey campaigns for very big companies. I talk like, I don't know, Ford and so on. And I was so fascinated. I was young. I was just finished university. I was so fascinated. I was like, oh my God, I want to be like you guys. This is what I want to do, right? And one of the senior guys said, you need first to join the Sharks and then come back here.
Yeah.
Meaning you need to understand first how learning and development teams work, how they select us because they do the acquisition.
Yes.
You need to understand the process, the culture, everything. And then you come back and be a consultant, right? So I did exactly the same with the agency. Said, okay, I just follow the advice. So I went into corpo. Then in corpo, I went into RevOps and so on, or sales ops mainly. And then I did the agency, right? So I really, but this is only my story, right? I have one guy, Sergey, also 24, 25. The guy only was in agencies. Like, he's much smarter than me because when I was 24, right? Because he just went on a different route right away with agencies as your guy.
Exactly. I think you can take different routes. In the end of the day, though, like, what we're doing, I think it's about being open to possibilities. I think that's the big piece of advice I would have given my younger self with this. I still suspect I probably would have made the same decisions because that's kind of who I am, if you see what I mean. Like, there's like that's the route I would choose to go down. I see myself doing something more agency-like, if you like, in terms of that sort of work. Probably not my next role, but maybe a couple of roles after that. Do you know what I mean? Like, doing something that is more applying that knowledge and that skill and that experience that I have. But you can definitely do it the other way around. And I think people who do it the other way around, it must be super intense. Like it must be really, really full on. But if it works for you, then great. So yeah.
Yeah. But bottom line, I think learning and continuous learning is key here, because it it's a position where you just cannot stop. Unfortunately, for some, it's not like you would just do one task, because everything that changes in the market, in your business, you can impact and you're impacted about, because first of all, the fire extinguishing, like that's the first signal that something is happening in the market,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you need to fix and change.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that learning, continuous learning, is something key. And before we finish, and finishing with learning and development, uh, what's your suggestion, like for the RevOps folks out there? Like, what's the best way to learn? Is it more offline into communities,
Yeah.
or is it more into online things?
So I have a sort of a 2x2 matrix for this, if you like, because I used to be in enablement or learning and development. So to me, it goes in this.
Yeah.
So knowledge, skill, will, environment. Okay. And you have to foster all of those. So
Okay.
if you're trying to learn and you don't have any knowledge of the subject, your first thing has to be a knowledge gathering exercise, right? So that means you probably, and
Mm.
different people acquire knowledge in different ways. I enjoy listening to it, i.e., sort of like podcasts or things, or reading about it. But if I'm reading, I have to be really active. I know that like I have to sort of make notes and things like that. Then comes the skill. So if you've learned something, you need to try and apply it. So if you can't give yourself opportunities to apply that knowledge, then that's a problem. And applying that knowledge can be, in your day-to-day jobs, but maybe that's not possible. Maybe you don't work in a RevOps type function right now, and you don't have that ability to apply some of those things. But you'd be amazed what you can do online. So I'll give you a real example. I wanted to upskill myself with, this is a few years ago now, with Tableau, and I didn't have really
Mm-hmm.
the space to do that in my work. If you see what I mean, I wasn't allowed to. Basically, essentially, they were quite tightly controlled, the Tableau licenses and the ability to publish reports. So I just used to publish stuff publicly. I just used to do Tableau public and just like make stuff, and just didn't ever get any feedback on it. I don't know if anyone ever looked at my stuff, but the point was I was doing it. Do you know what I mean? You're actually, because it's one thing learning what to do, it's another thing you got to do it. Then it's will. So the will and the environment, I think, stitch together. And I think that's where communities help you.
Mm.
So if you jump straight into communities without any knowledge or skill, you're probably going to learn something because you'll pick up some knowledge and skill, but you're not being very intentional about it. Whereas if you try and develop
Mm-hmm.
knowledge and skill and you've got being purposeful and intentional with that, then when you go into these communities, you will be able to talk about, you might like, I really want to do this. I'm trying to do this. Does anyone else have any experience with this? And this is where the RevOps communities come in, I think, because they're really beautiful places where people are so generous with their time, with their knowledge and their expertise. And I know, because I've experienced it, like, we had we still have a problem with it, to be honest with you. With like, we needed to sort out something very specific on Salesforce around issues with duplicates, and sort of dealing with that. And we didn't have a tool to do it, so we had to sort of do it ourselves. And I reached out to the community. We had a very clear objective we were trying to achieve, and I had people help me, and they'd all been through the same experiences. They were having the same challenges. We learned how they were doing it. It's a very specific example, but to me, it's those four things, and you can't just do one of them. That's the key thing. You have to like do all four of them. That's my approach, and that can be big or small. It could be a little thing you're trying to learn, or a big thing.
Yeah, I love this, especially the environment part, because um, I never thought of it as such an important element of the learning. I always had this idea that is like communities have kind of sense of belonging, like where people can understand my frustrations and we can learn together. But yeah, like it's so important to be in a city or be in a place like you guys are in London, where you have this community where you can meet these people. Obviously online is also fine, but having this personal connection, I think it's so important.
And I hope you don't mind me promoting an event. I've got nothing to do with the event, but I will say
Please do it.
every year it's really, really good. So the RevOps Alliance event in London, which is in December, and I don't remember
RevOps
the exact
Alliance.
date, is fantastic. So that takes place in sort of central London. It's a little bit out. It's very easy to get to. There's a lot of people that travel to it from outside of the UK because it's quite well served with airports and things like that. It's 2 days. It's fantastic. Highly recommend that to anyone who's got an interest in finding their environment, right? Finding their community. It's a brilliant event. I've done it 3 years in a row now, and I'd like to think I'm someone who has got quite a lot out of it, but I know I'll get more out of it. I know I've not topped out. Do you know what I mean? I'll get more out of it next year, or this year even, I mean. And I know they do an event as well. I don't know if you have American listeners, but I know they do an event in a couple of events in America as well. So there's other events that they do. They're a good team.
Perfect. So we will look into it. Yeah, majority of our listeners are from the US. Nevertheless, flying in from EMEA also into London is easy peasy. So thanks. I see Joe Aurelia is also here doing podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
We had a nice conversation.
We'll have to get you there.
So yeah, for sure. Maybe I'll try to come.
Yeah. You do a live podcast or something, Romeo.
Yeah, that would be cool. Oh, I see that you have it in San Francisco. So great.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the suggestion of the event, and for the community. It was great talking to you. Before we end, what is a book that you recommend for RevOps guys, and where can they find you?
Okay, so you'll find me on LinkedIn. So I'm Sam Sutton on LinkedIn, Sutton. I'm always happy to accept connections and have a chat. Books. I don't tend to read. I don't tend to read business books. It's just not my thing. Okay, and I've been asked this question on a podcast before. So I'm going to say that the best thing you can do for your RevOps brain is to give it a break. Okay, and read a book that isn't about RevOps, but is just an enjoyable book. So a book that I've recommended many times to people, and I have recommended this on another podcast, so I apologize if anyone's heard me twice and is hearing me repeat myself, but All the Light We Cannot See is a beautiful book. It's set in Europe during the Second World War. It follows the story of a young girl and her journey through the war. She's in Paris. And then it follows a young boy and his journey through the war, and he's German. And it's a really beautiful book because there's so much literature about that time that takes like a side, if you see what I mean. Like it puts everyone who's in German is they're bad, or everyone who's this side is this or good or whatever. And it just isn't about that at all. It's just about a story about two young people who get caught up in this terrible time. And yeah, it's one of my favorite books. It's a beautiful book. So it doesn't help you with RevOps necessarily, but maybe it gives your brain a chance to reflect more. And it's a beautiful book.
Yeah, and it's also a Netflix
don't bother with that.
series or movie, right?
Read the book.
Okay, of course. It's always the book. It's always the book.
Netflix kind of ruined it by creating I'm sure it's very good, but I strongly recommend the book.
So don't watch the movie first. Read the book, then watch the movie, and then you will appreciate more the book.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot, Sam. Thanks a lot, guys, for tuning in. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Bye.